Hello, friends and lovers. What's up? It's me, it's Haelian. I'm here with a new fear guide for you. We need an updated one ever since the Olympic update came out. Totally ruined my old guide, basically. You know, we got some changes here that are going to be really important. It really changed a lot about how you're going to choose the different fears that we have here, the different oaths and all that sort of stuff. So this video is going to talk about how to build up your fear, what are the easiest ones to pick, and then how to beat those different loadouts. 8, 16, then 32 fear. We'll kind of go over it individually. What do you want to keep an eye out for? We're going to go over just a couple of useful builds, and we're going to talk about the difference here between the surface and the underworld, because there is kind of a big difference, I think, or at least a couple key differences when it comes between the two different routes that we have in the game and how you want to load out your oaths. So you're going to want to pay attention to that, but don't worry, I'll cover them both for you here. So first, why don't we talk about some of the different vows that we have here, and we'll build up the fear. Let's start with talking about the surface, because I know a lot of people are really interested in the surface and how to gear it up. So first, let's talk about forfeit. Your first boon in each region becomes an onion instead. This is actually quite cheap on the surface route, whereas it's quite bad in the underworld. Not getting a boon in the first chamber in the underworld is pretty painful, because that usually means you're waiting multiple chambers to get it. Whereas on the surface, you just wait like one more, really, because all of the rewards in the first zone on the surface, which is Aphira, are all major rewards. So even if you have to roll the door once or twice in the second chamber, you're gonna get a boon back. So there's really no suffering with forfeit on the surface. So that was super cheap for 3 fear. It's great. It's great, honestly. Denial is another really easy one that I think you kind of just have to take. 2 unpicked blessings shall not appear again this night. So you cross off the boons that you don't take. It can get messy. It can get messy, honestly, with this. So you do have to think about it, but now they have fixed it so that when you open your codex in the middle of a run, if you have banished or denied, whatever you want to call it, boons because of this fear, then you can actually look at it and it'll tell you in the codex which have been banished and that you cannot see again in this night, because otherwise you might have to suffer being forced into swaps and weird things like that. And we're already at 5 fear, and then the next one has to be Hubris, I think. After you choose a boon, you prime 3 or 6 magic at rank 2 for each rarity greater than common, I should say. It's just very cheap for what you're actually getting here. I think it's actually quite easy. So yes, dual boons will prime 4 times that amount, so 24 magic. But you just don't really feel it. If you're spending a lot of magic in your build, you might have to think about the rarities a little bit and just try to avoid epics. You know, you can't just take the shiny boon every time, I guess, if you have this on, you know what I'm saying? But otherwise, it's just really easy, I think. And then if we just want to get to 8 fear for our first little gate, I guess you could say, you know, vow of time, 9 minutes per zone, very easy. I know some people hate the timer. I know some of y'all hate it. You refuse to use it. You don't want to use it. That's fine. You don't have to use it. I personally like to play the game around the timer rather than attempting to avoid it. It's just how I have fun playing the game, I guess I could say. But anytime I tell you that you should take vow of time, if you don't want to, you can kind of just replace it with more enemies from something like hordes, namely. You know what I'm saying? But let's just start with like 8. So I guess we're going to do menace for now. Why don't we say menace? You could do menace, you could do time. So this is a good surface 8 fear, and it works for any weapon, any build. It doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about that. You know, hubris, you could argue, oh, well, you don't want to have to use magic because you're taking hubris. You don't got to think about it that hard. It's not that bad, trust me. So this is a good 8 fear loadout. Now, if you're going to go do the underworld instead, you're going to want to drop forfeit, I think, if you're just doing 8. Let's take the second menace. Most foes have a 25% chance to be from the next region. Now, I mean, it's not good, but it's, you know, the least bad. And then we just need 1 more fear. So again, I would say time would probably be the easy one. But if you don't want to do that, then you can just do 1 on the horde. You could potentially do 1 on the wards if you wanted, but that just really, really depends on what your boon choices are and things of that nature. So that one's a little iffy. Personally, I would throw hordes. We can discuss all these different things like grit and return and everything, but I guess I would say hordes if you have to pick one of these ones that really makes enemies take longer to kill right now. All right, so let's go back to the surface for a minute here. So if we're going to try to work our way up to 16 fear now, let's go ahead and throw on the second level of menace then. I think after that, you kind of need to start thinking about frenzy here. It's probably about time. Debt is easy in a way. You're just not going to buy a lot of things. This one's kind of an interesting one because it's definitely not great. But yeah, you could easily do debt and then do the 1 on the timer here. for 9 minutes. I mean, you could easily do 2 on the timer first and then drop the debt if you're comfortable with 7 minutes. Again, if we're going to the surface, then the timer's going to... Actually, I don't think I have brought this up. The timer's going to be a lot tougher on the surface to beat. I don't recommend a 5-minute timer on the surface at any amount of fear, honestly, for the most part, unless that's like the only fear you're doing, and unless you're just really wanting to challenge yourself, because the game set up in such a way where 5 minutes is just harder on the surface. It just straight up is. These are not equal. These routes are not equal, okay? It will take you longer to clear via in-game time the surface on average. You know, Olympus is a very long zone. The first zone is also quite long. It depends on a lot of RNG to actually just get a really low in-game time and keep that timer behaving, you know what I mean? So if you're gonna do a 7-minute deadline, I would not go up to 5 at any point in the fear for this. But yeah, this is a good, easy 16 fear, I think, here we have set up. So you have 1 frenzy, so enemies are going to be 20% faster, but everything else we kind of already discussed, it should be okay. If you want to get rid of the timer, then we still have 2 fear to do. You can consider Shadow, so this is one of the new ones. So Wardens will have a Shadow Servant, which kind of means that they might have a duplicate, or they might just have ads. So I guess you could look at it pretty easily. All of the mini bosses will now have ads that you have to deal with, or at least avoid at the same time. You could do Shadow, but I guess either Debt or the timer would be my top choices right here, because I think Debt is easy to deal with. Like, you can usually afford health, but you're not going to be buying a lot of boons, that's for sure at that point. But yeah, this works quite well for the surface. All right, back to the Underworld. So I think, again, we have to up Frenzy. We don't have Forfeit on again, so we have to keep that off if we're going to the Underworld, I do think. We're going to go and do Debt. The timer should be more forgiving in the Underworld. The zones are just kind of shorter. This kind of gets into the weeds when we start discussing the timer and stuff, because there's elements of luck here, you know? There are things that you can do to make the timer more easy for yourself, like making sure you take the shops. Even if you don't have money to spend, that means that's a chamber where you don't have to fight enemies and you can avoid having to use time for it. Chaos Gates will also allow you to skip combat. Making sure you take all the event rooms like Arachne or Echo will help you skip chambers. There's a lot of nuance behind it, and we can't get into it all here, I'm afraid. Has to be another video if you want to see it, you know what I mean? We're already at 15 here with the choices that we've taken so far, so you just need 1 more. So there's a lot of different options. You could take almost anything here, I think, for 1 more. I think Scars is an easy one. You know what I mean? If you're okay with taking more enemies, you can go ahead and tack on 20% more enemies, I guess. I'm avoiding Pain right now. For some reason, I feel like 1 Scars is easier than 1 Pain. Don't actually know if that's actually the case. It's just how it feels. I guess now we'll kind of go over really quickly Void. You have access to 100, 60, 40, 20, or 0% of your grasp for your Arcana. You will never take this, going up to 32 fear. You will never take this. Yeah, sure, you can do a judgment run and use a little bit of Void. If you want to do that, go ahead. It is not a good strategy for trying to beat good amounts of fear is going to be my personal take. But hey, if you like it, then go ahead. Let me know what your loadout is for it then. Maybe you'll change my mind someday. All right, I think it's just easier if I just have it here. So this is, again, a recommendation for this surface. 32 fear. Here is the hard one, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of really difficult choices to be made here. So here's one loadout that I think that can work. You're not going to like it. You know, there are a lot of things to not like here. So we have 2 Pain for 60% more damage. We have double Frenzy, so foes are 40% faster. We do have to turn on 1 Fang, so most of those armor will have an additional perk. This is similar to Benefits package to Hades 1. It feels tougher, though, to me. It does feel tougher. I wonder, you know, I tried it both ways with 2 Fangs and 1 Frenzy. They both feel pretty rough. Honestly, you could kind of go either way. I'm still kind of on the fence about which one's worse here, you know what I mean? But Frenzy just feels like a little more familiar to me, I guess you could say. So Forfeit on it. It's time to turn on Shadow for sure. There's absolutely no question about it. I still have the 7-minute timer since we're going in surface. 50% less healing, 40% more enemies. And that's all she wrote, you know what I mean? Now, so one of the big debates here is, what is the easiest way to, you know, deal with hordes, grit, wards, or return? You know, like, which one do you choose? You know, because a lot of times in both Hades games, you're kind of balancing a lot of your fear or heat choices around the timer that you're being forced to take. So we have to decide how we're going to deal with that and what's the easiest way to do it. Is 40% more enemies straight up easier than a 50% chance for enemies to come back as a revenant that you have to collect? I think for me, I have finally decided that the Revenants are a pain in my ass, okay? They're not fun to deal with. They are surprisingly difficult and just cause general problems, you know? They also kind of force you to get hit a little bit more often. More enemies just feels simpler, you know? It's easier to deal with. It doesn't cause psychological damage like having to deal with Revenants respawning on you. They are just surprisingly difficult. Now, does that mean that they are strictly worse to take than Hordes? No, you know, but I guess this is going to be my recommendation. What about Grit, though? What if we just said make all enemies, including the bosses, have 20% more HP? It's a possibility. Once again, I think for me, Hordes ekes it out a little bit. Now, Wards is kind of interesting here. All foes get to barrier, as they call it in this one, or damage control, whichever way you want to think about it. So what about this one? So they negate the first 2 hits that they take. If you're taking a Poseidon-oriented build with a lot of on-hit effects, or somehow you're aiming for Scorch, or maybe someone like Demeter's Cast Boon, anything that hits like really rapidly for some free damage, this is fine. You know, like this works easily. You could do this. It just really depends on those things. If you know you're going to save a slot for that, then you could potentially make do with this. Absolutely. I might recommend it even, you know. This is kind of where the toss-up is, I think, for me mostly right now, is where you put these last 2 points and how you choose your poison in terms of how you're going to get either more enemies or chunkier enemies, whichever. The way in which you're going to artificially increase the time that you spend in each room. Where are you going to choose it? Honestly, I think almost any of these or a mixture of them can work. I think for me, with Revenants, though, I will say all or nothing when it comes to Revenants. I don't think you want 25% of Revenants at any one point. You either want to have to think about them or you don't want to have to think about them. And just save your brain the calculations, you know what I'm saying? So I would either say all or nothing on that one. But yeah, either Hordes or Wards would be my choice, at least for the surface here. All right, probably no surprise what I'm going to go ahead and take for the Underworld here. We turn a forfeit one more time. You turn up the timer for 5 minutes. This is what I would personally do. This looks pretty good to me. I like it. You could do Fangs as well here, potentially, and drop, you know, like the Wards or something if you're really scared about the extra enemies here. If you want to take 100% more damage, you could potentially think about that. I don't know if I would recommend it, though. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these combinations are fine toward the end here. It's really just these last couple of Fear that you have to choose where to put them. Once again, though, I think either Wards or Hordes would work just fine here, even with the 5-minute timer, as long as you're careful. Don't spend any more extra chambers in Tartarus than you need to. And by the way, you do have a new tool, by the way. The Fig Leaf from Dionysus can help you skip some of the chambers now, and up to 3 chambers per zone. Hopefully you get all 3, right? Which will save you some time in the long run. I wouldn't use it in Erebus, but anywhere else it works, you know? It works fine, and it'll save you time, and it might make things a little bit easier for you. So that's one way to combat that. But yeah, I think this is a pretty reliable 32 Fear setup for the Underworld. All right, with that in mind, let's talk about builds a little bit. Let's talk about what we got going on over here. And I actually already have the weapon on that I sort of have in mind to start. And of course, it is the new weapon, the Black Coat. I do actually think this isn't just because it's flavor of the month or anything. I have had a surprising good return on doing 32 Fear on the surface. 32 Fear on the surface is hard. I mean, 32 Fear on the Underworld is also hard, but it is legitimately significantly more difficult on the surface, I think. So don't feel bad if it's going to take you a few tries. But I have done quite well with the aspect of Mel for the Black Coat here. And you focus in on the attack. Forget about the special or the Omega special for the most part. Ignore it. It's just kind of in an odd place right now. I don't think it's working out quite well. So focusing on the attack with aspect of Mel here, I think will actually work really well. One thing to keep in mind with the Black Coat is the dash attack is actually really strong and quite different from the regular attack. This is the dash attack. It has a 360-degree radius in which it hits everything around you. There is one hammer that's incredibly strong that makes it so it hits like 4 times. It's called Exhaust Riser. Definitely recommend that if you can get it in the run as well. But you can't always guarantee that. So how do you do this? Well, it hits quite rapidly. Rapidly enough to where putting Poseidon on the attack would be a strong choice here, I think. And then it's also super reliable when you do this, and it makes that Ward's Oath much easier to deal with as well. So it's very reliable. So you start with Poseidon's Keepsake or Aphira to make sure we get Poseidon very soon. Don't worry, the onion will not gobble up your Keepsake, even if you're going to get the onion, right? But don't worry, Poseidon will still be guaranteed even after the onion there, so it does not get ruined. So you'd start with Poseidon's keepsake, and then for the second zone, I'd recommend probably going into Athena's keepsake. She's currently bugged in this current build, but hopefully it's fixed by the time you're watching this video. Just because she has some really strong effects, but that really depends on whether you're using strength or not. We're going to get into that in a second here. Some good defensive keepsakes. I love the engraved pin, and especially if you're doing the strength build with no death defiances. This does not ruin strength, so this way you get the benefit of both the pin and strength all at once here to trust Savior behind. The tooth is also okay as a decent defensive, I think, as well. After that, I mean, you might have to want to use the fig leaf to try to avoid some encounters on the surface. Once again, it's bugged in the rift, so unfortunately it's not working correctly there, but it does work in Mount Olympus, I guess. But of course, then that means you have to fight Prometheus without any keepsake like that. But what can you do, you know? So that's probably a pretty good way of using the keepsakes if you're going to go to the surface. So you go with the God keepsake, then you probably do a defensive keepsake like the pin to consider, maybe the tooth, maybe Athena if she's working it, maybe the fig leaf if you're super concerned about the timer, maybe if you're brave and you're doing a 5-minute timer on the surface. It's definitely possible to do a 5-minute timer at 32 fear on the surface. I have done it, but I recognize that it's not very reliable. And I already have an Akarna card set up for us for this particular build that I have in mind here. So again, you're going for Poseidon's attack, and that's going to be the main thing that we're aiming for here. After that, what do you want? I mean, just worry mostly about origination after that, I'd say. But don't worry, I'll give you a couple things to aim for. But yeah, origination, when you have 2 curses on enemies, you'll deal 50% more damage. We have the Lover's Arm, so avoid the first 3 hits of each boss battle. And you have the Queen on, so that we could try to get a dual boon, maybe. Don't really care that much about Divinity. I don't have Strength on in this particular setup, but you could swap it out if you so wanted. It does turn off Divinity, but that might actually be good if we have Hubris on, honestly. So you might have to deal with just epic boons, I'm afraid, you know? So is Strength good or not? I mean, everything else here is pretty normal. I don't have the Sorceress on because we don't really plan to cast a lot of Omegas. So do you want to take Strength or not? You could go either way. It's weirdly well balanced. I am shocked that it's weirdly well balanced where I'm kind of torn between Strength and using 3 Death Defiances. I'm not sure which one's better right now. I have been using Strength a lot more personally at the moment. I think it's doing better for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is better quite yet. You know what I mean? So I guess if you force me to pick one, I'm going to pick Strength just because it's kind of more fun at least. Plus you get the damage bonus, you know, it just feels good, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, we lose Divinity by turning off the Death Defiances, but honestly, that's okay. Everything else is kind of normal. Again, we don't have the Sorceress on. We don't plan to use any Omega moves with a build like this, so I think that works out just fine. So that's a pretty good way of doing it. So what kind of dual boons am I talking about? So if you're going to do Poseidon on the attack here, so I think a good segue into that is to try to get Slippery Slope from Poseidon soon after that, which will allow you to apply a curse with your attack, because without it, you don't apply a curse with a Poseidon boon. And then you can try to go for a boon from Hestia, like the cast, namely, and then maybe you can activate Scalding Vapor here, which will inflict steam upon the enemies and will help you out with that damage a little bit. That's probably the best case scenario here. Another little tip with this weapon in particular is that you can actually kind of sneak out the special rockets while attacking. You do kind of interrupt your attack animation here, so I'm not like hell-bent that this is like a super easy strategy, but you can kind of see it, right? I'm using my thumb just to hit both buttons at once. Luckily, I got a wide thumb, I guess you could say here, right? So it kind of works for me. Do you have to do this? Not necessarily. If it's a pain, just use the attack button only, maybe. But it does kind of work in a strange way, you know what I mean? The other thing is, the last thing I guess you could say for this particular build is that against Prometheus, the block does kind of help. So this is the Omega attack. The block will help against Prometheus in particular because Prometheus loves to chase after you and try to hound you down with melee moves. And then he kind of has like a little cooldown in between. So you can kind of hold it down, let go, try to let go even at the slightly wrong moment, and it's going to be a little more forgiving. But that's the easiest way to get down with Prometheus, I think. I think this is the best case scenario for beating 32 fear on the surface right now. But let's go over at least one more. All right, the next best build I think we got, which is probably, to me, the strongest aspect in the game because it's so hard to mess it up. It is the aspect of Moros. Your attacks linger for 6 seconds and explode in a blast if struck by your specials. That is for the torches here. So here's how you'd want to start every single chamber when you're using Aspect of Moros. charge an Omega Special, and then just hold down the attack until you run out of Omega Specials. Those are the orbs around us here. Once those gone, then you charge up a new Omega Special. And you can drop your cast, and this is sort of the case for most of the aspects too. You can drop your cast while charging here, so you don't have to make that a separate action. You don't even have to interrupt your attack at all by dropping that. It's very, very strong. It's very strong. For hammers, I definitely recommend Clean Candle, Clean Helix. Both of those are pretty good, but focusing on the attack damage is going to do quite well for you there. So I think Zeus works really well on the special for this weapon, just because the Blitz damage is going to be really high, and Blitz just happens to be in quite a strong place here. It applies a curse, deals a lot of damage, and works really well for a weapon that is applying multiple avenues of damage, where you can apply the Blitz with the special, but also deal a lot of attack damage at the same time here. So that way you can kind of do both at once. Otherwise, Blitz is going to struggle if you're just mashing the attack the whole time, and you have Blitz on the attack, and you're never using your special. It's going to struggle a little bit more in those types of scenarios, so that's why it's perfect for this particular situation. Something like Aphrodite's attack is still fantastic for this. You could also go Apollo, you could go Poseidon. You could use anyone's attack here, even at 32 Fear, and I think you'll have a pretty good time, honestly. It's kind of hard to mess up this aspect because it's probably overpowered right now, truth be told. Here's a very more wonky looking Arcana card setup, but I think it works quite well here. We do make sure to have the Huntress on. I also have Death on, which is a little iffy. You don't need it, really. Death is kind of the thing where I'm not certain it's worth 3 grasp. I mean, it definitely works quite well here where we are alternating between different Omega moves here, but do you need 15% crit chance? It's kind of questionable, you know what I mean? I turned the Boatman off because I don't know if you really need it, especially if you're going to the Underworld. I don't know why. You just don't need them as much when you go to the Underworld, though, right now. Yeah, sure, you'll miss the gold and you'll miss the rerolls and things like that, but you don't have to have them. We don't need Divinity. We don't need the Queen. It's fine. Strength is still on again. You do want the Huntress on, potentially for that previous build we just talked about, but you could also do without it, honestly, at the same time, just because if you're not going to be using your Omega moves, you're probably going to forget to spend magic at the start of every encounter in order to get the bonus from the Huntress anyway. So yeah, you would start, let's say just for example, we're going to go to the Underworld. You start with Zeus's Keepsake for Erebus, and then in the second zone, you'd probably want to do Athena's Keepsake if you're running Strength just to get her boon. Divine Dash is really, really strong. Even Mental Block, incredibly strong boon from her. For the third zone, you could probably swap right into the Pin. I would say you do not want to use Luckier Tooth if you're going to be running Strength, by the way. And by the way, for the pets, I guess, which is going to be the last remark before I just show you some footage, Hecuba's nice, but probably not in as good of a spot for higher amounts of fear. Same thing with the Raven, just doesn't really work well. So if you're running Strength build, it's probably Frog all day still, I'm afraid. Anyway, I'm going to show you a little bit from a run where I did with the Mel coat on the surface, and hopefully you can get sort of an idea of why it worked, at least a little bit. I'm going to show you the end of the run, just like the last few chambers, and hopefully it'll help you out a little bit in case you got questions. But by the way, of course, let me know if you do have questions about Fear, or if you have loadouts that worked really well for you. I would love to hear about them. Please let me know down in the comments as you do. Thank you so much for watching, and enjoy the footage, and I'll see you in another one. Is that actually more meaningful than 40 more armors? Probably not. I'm gonna do it. Let's try it out.
What's for delivery?
81 in 4 encounters. You could rush the delivery, which is probably the wise thing to do. Okay. No Selene. Go. 4 seconds long as time. It's very long, yeah. It doesn't really feel good. $20 power is a lot on the special. Oh! Imagine that with Aspect of Hand with just so many hits. I wonder. I don't know there.
Good find.
Oh, we got Dio! Baby. We still have a Fig left. I think there's one more chamber, too. Sure, he can sing. Sure. Bounce back, no. Hold cast to lob a large explosive. Binding circle forms there. It's generally annoying. So I guess we're going to take Happy Haze, but I don't know if that's that good. Oh, I could have rolled, right? Did I want to roll? Maybe. No Fig Leaf here. No Athena here. So we actually did lose out on the Fig Leaf. We did get two free natural chambers between Dio and Icarus, though, I guess, at least. There could be more, though. You can get Chaos Gates, you can get a mid-shop, although the mid-shop feels like kind of infrequent here. Hey, why'd you do that? Oh, God. Oh, God. Alright, that thing's stuck in the Festive Fog. Whew. Okay, we're good. We're done, right? That's it. Don't have that much money. We're just going to take the max health. I gotta admit, it was a pretty easy run. I don't think we can't lose, right, chat? Ain't no way. Ain't no way. So maybe this was the easiest build all along. Out of dialogue. Let's dodge the bird for the first moment here. Now that bird's gone. Spin around in circles. No need to rush.
Very well.
Ah, shit.
What do you see?
Pick me some flowers. Top, middle, top.
Combust.
Add a magic here. Ay-ya, dude. Got me.
Legions form up.
Oh, shit, dude. That wombo. Okay, we got a lot left in us. Okay. Okay, dude. Why, though?
Suffer then.
Woo. Bottom, top, middle, top.
2 ashes.
Even when I'm near them, they don't do anything. Unintended, probably. Woo. See what he does here. Oh, damn. He just keeps going. When does his combo end? Drag him to the Festive Fog here. 40. Yeah. $28. Ah! It was a little bit closer, but we did it.
This was nothing at all.
Had to use it all, you know what I mean? Had to use it all.
A narrow victory, but still.
Tough, huh? Not as good as like the Scalding Vapor run we had in the past, but yeah. It was pretty reliable, you gotta admit.
Somehow.
Considering how many times I failed. 32 fear on the surface with like other weapons and aspect. Prometheus did 545 damage to me. So what did the work here? I mean, I guess he got these 3 basic principles. He had two solid hammers for us here, right? Attack did 49k, waves did 46k, blitz did an okay amount. Rarities were pretty low for us, huh? Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a lot to this. You know, nimble limbs. Hailstorm, I guess, was okay. It's kind of hard to tell, because it doesn't, like, show up anywhere. I don't know what that counts as for damage, if anything. Probably not blitz, don't know. Yeah, I didn't even have the dash strike hammer. Dash strike hammer is supremely strong.